Hi everyone. Welcome to the August Fireside Chat. I am joining you today from Denver, Colorado, a lovely hotel room at the Gaylord. For those of you who travel a lot, this is, I think, the smallest of the Gaylords, but definitely a pretty interesting vibe as they all have. Less steamy, though, than the Gaylords that have the atriums in them, like the one in Orlando. So, welcome. And with me today, I've got three amazing panelists to talk about cybersecurity table stakes. What that means when we say that is there's that kind of solid piece where you feel comfortable with your security stack specifically. How did these three get to that point? What changes do they make? How often are they making those? And then even more importantly, how are they getting that next level, those partners, those customers and clients to pay for that and to be really bought in their security? Because at the end of the day, you've got to have folks on the other end of the computers who believe in what you're doing as well. So we'll do some quick intros. I'm just going to go around in the order that everybody's on my screen. So, Jacob.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Jacob, Director of Business Development at Digacore. Yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And where are you joining? You're in New York, correct?
Yeah, we're at the Jersey Shore.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you. And Jeremy.
Afternoon, Jeremy Pogue from Intregris. I'm in Austin, Texas. Organization-wise, we're all over the United States. So
Awesome. I'm here actually with a bunch of your folks this week at this event in Denver. And Bobby.
Bobby Guerra, I'm the CEO of Axiom. We're an MSP, started about 2002, I guess. So in dog year for MSPs, that's like 100. So it's seen a lot of change. And Jacksonville, Florida, we're predominantly in Florida, but we've been moving into doing CMMC. We should be one of the first MSPs to be level 2 certified when it becomes available later this year or early next year.
That's amazing. I know how hard you and the team have worked to get to that. So we will have a bottle of wine when that happens.
I'll probably cry. I'm not gonna lie. it's like crazy tough, man. It's like crazy tough.
That is amazing. So looks like we've got some folks out in the audience. It's slowly ticking up. So we'll go ahead and get really started here. And yes, there is a lot of Mandalorian behind Bobby, and we might go down that path, and behind Jeremy as well. So we might go down that path at some point, discussing the amazing things in their backgrounds. So for security specifically, kind of thinking through your company's journey of security, I've been in the space for 11 years, which is, it feels again in dog years. And I've seen the shift in security from a very non-technical perspective. But when did you guys kind of decide that this is probably something that we should be paying a bit more attention to, and that AV just isn't enough anymore?
I'll kick off. Coming as Intregris, we've kind of come together as multiple organizations. And us, the organizations joined from Caltech, we started about 6 years ago. We were really focused on financial institutions and the regulations around those. So we had kind of a easier path into it as it was defined by those regulations. So as they would come in and ask for more, we were able to follow suit and drive some of that industry side of things. So it's been, 6-7 years in the making on our side.
Yeah, for us, we kind of woke up when we saw version 8 of CIS come out. And because we were just sort of like brailing our way is the best way to kind of describe it. Just kind of like, okay, let's try to figure out this whole security thing. Because just like you said, the efficiency and efficacy of like these different products are changing all the time. And then you started getting this pretty penny thing where you're trying to grab whatever seemed to be the best, coolest thing on the show floor. And it was a rat race, and we needed to have focus, and we needed to know that we were doing the right thing. And then once we're like, man, let's have a standard, let's focus on that. And as we started switching and focusing on that, and then seeing how we align to all the specific holes and recommendations that the different levels of CIS reveal, our eyes started opening, and it really changed the direction of our company in a really good way.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. For us, we started making a very heavy push into healthcare about 3-4 years ago. And within healthcare, they have HIPAA requirements. And I think healthcare is getting even more targeted than ever before with the Change Healthcare hack and things like that. So we realized that even though they may be a little cheaper, but we need to start pushing them to do these kind of changes and make sure that they're secure and their patients are secure, because otherwise we're the ones that are going to be to blame, not them.
So I ask this question a lot at conferences and I get very varying answers here, but if you had to guess, how many security tools do you think you have in your security stack? Be that, good, better, best, gold, bronze, insert precious metal here. But how many vendors' tools do you think you engage with for your security offerings? Jeremy, I'm going to start with you because I know your number is
too high,
an outlier.
Yeah. Again, coming together, we have quite a bit that we support. As we narrow it down, obviously that's the goal of everyone, to keep that sprawl down. But currently we support a wide amount. Again, coming together of 7-8 industries or MSPs together, each had their stack that they want, that they supported, and then the wide range across the board. So again, we're kind of an outlier in that system with us being so large. But we are north of 50 in terms of current vendors that we are working with and supporting products on.
That's wild.
So, Jacob?
Yeah. I mean, we have around, and the real question is, what do you consider a security tool? I think everything nowadays, everybody's trying to, Microsoft's pushing their security stuff. So
Fair.
We have, I would say, around 5 to 10 different security tools. I think as more companies are adding more features, like Huntress is adding their 365, their SIEM, right? There's going to be a lot more consolidation into one specific set than having sprawl over 5 to 10. So I'm really hoping that really progresses a lot more in our industry.
It's like 5 for us. Less is more. We don't want to have any more tools than we have to for various reasons. Your tools can also be used against you, right? So you've got to think about that. And for us, we don't have a gold, better, best, or whatever. It's like we talk with the client. This is how we do it. And do you want to engage with us? It makes the selling process easier. I think also clients don't want to purchase or buy or get involved with things they don't understand. So if you have so much complexity in your sales process and various different levels and additions and changes, it just only almost becomes a math equation. And so for us, we keep it very focused. We focus on the efficacy of the products. Are they continuing to return? If they don't, we then transition out of those tools. I would say Huntress is probably our longest vendor that we've kept. Security tool. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we've had y'all the longest out of everybody, interestingly enough. I just realized that.
That is a massive badge of honor.
Good job, Huntress.
I'll say one thing that you didn't touch on, Bobby, is the training across it as well. Whenever you start getting that sprawl, the efficacy of each of those tools, diminishes as, depending on the size of your organization. So that's the other thing that should drive, that stack, is making sure that, it's great. We could offer 1,000, but then you'd know just a tiny bit of each one. So, it really depends on the size of the organization and, what you guys can train and effectively push out there.
So true. That is such a big deal. And, I've had, I attend various different conferences and peer groups. And like, I've had some people say like, well, I don't know if I like Huntress because we put it on a lot of systems and they didn't find anything. And it didn't really tell us a lot. I'm like, so let me get this straight. You're so used to having tools that scream at you about false positives and are throwing lots of things and errors and tie up your staff. You feel like something's quite not right. What's wrong with our belief in the industry and the system that's kind of what we're used to and expect. And we were pleasantly surprised at how efficient the product actually worked for us as we were utilizing it. And it felt like almost cheating in a good way.
Yeah.
Mine is always when somebody says that, I'm like, congratulations.
Yeah.
We don't want to find things when you deploy us at first, especially on your internal machines.
And you can do internal testing. There's all kinds of things that you can do to validate the product is looking, but you just don't want to man, we've rolled out RMMs and they just buried us in so many logs, and the tuning of it was just such a nightmare.
Yeah, that alert fatigue is a killer for cybersecurity teams for sure. So I will agree on that. The reduction in noise is one of the biggest things that they don't value. They give us actionable information and actionable intel. And I can speak that it works, getting to see it across a larger scale, just because it's not screaming every 5 minutes in each individual business organization. It's definitely doing its job. So,
Yeah.
So thinking through kind of how do you pick what goes in, knowing that there's a varying number of things, kind of what guides, how do you know, I get asked a lot, when do you know enough is enough? We talked a bit, so we did a prep call. We talked a bit about margins being a really key element.
Yeah, I think you've got to use a framework to pick how many seats are going to be on the bus, right? And what I mean by seats, like something that needs to solve a hole or a problem that your clients are going to be challenged with, and you have to set what the bar is where you feel like you're doing no harm to your client, right? You've got to have a defensible position that this is where I need to be at before I can engage that client safely and securely. And if I'm looking across a table at a lawyer, I can argue that what I'm doing is the right way to be handled, right? So you've got to figure out how many seats are going to be on that bus and what tools are going to sit in those seats to accomplish those. And a framework really helps do that. Now, there's so many people that get in such trouble when they start thinking about how they're going to try to apply that framework and implement that across their clients. That's a whole other discussion. And you have to track your profitability very closely about that. But what you have to pick for you and your offering should really be driven, in my opinion, by a framework. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. That, and then like you said, your client base. Each individual client is going to want different things, and what can you offer? Effectively across them to protect them. I think that's the biggest key. I mean, everybody goes and reads an obscure Reddit post and says, "I need XYZ," and then you come to them and you're like, "Well, what business problem is that solving?" They're like, well, that's what they said on Reddit I needed, and so it's one of those that needs to be driven by, the clientele, their business need, their business desires, their level of compliance, insurance requirements, all of those things. Because if you turn it loose to what us technicians and the nerds behind the scene will do, they'll go out and we'll provide them a million things to protect them. It's all to protect, and each one adds just a little bit more security. But, you have to kind of, like Bobby said, watch those margins, because, we get a little bit ahead of our skis there, as we start throwing too many things at them. And then all of a sudden they're paying too much, or we're not making enough on our end to be able to support it effectively. And you find that balance in the business.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me also is like you touched on so well, is what business problem is it solving, right? What does the customer really need? What are we trying to do over here? How are we trying to protect the customer, as well as trying to get as much as possible for less? How do we wrap everything into one thing or less items to protect more with those less items, right? Because then it saves the customer cost, it saves you cost, and your technicians have to deal with less items. So yes, following the frameworks, but like Bobby said, frameworks can get confusing. It's like, okay, there's 1,000 things I need to follow. I'm going to implement a different tool for each one, right? Then all of a sudden it goes everywhere. So it's really being able to break everything down and understand what the business needs and provide, a couple tools that really cover those basic items for your clients.
And the request for proof is coming. I think last year I had 2 requests from clients, and they didn't want to talk about what our security stack offering is. They wanted proof of our approach, the system security plan, a plan that outlines our approach, how we're doing it, and how it outlines based on something, what type of framework. So that's where, if you have a framework and then you create the documentation, just think right now to yourself, like if you had to prove your stance on what you do for your clients, could you put that in an email in 10 minutes? Like, could you send that to them to prove how you're approaching things? It's a shocking how many MSPs can't, which is sad, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that we're not doing a good job. It just means that we're not prepared to validate our approaches and how we do that. And it also implies that we're not reviewing that approach on a regular basis. And those are two very dangerous things.
Yeah.
I think the other side of that is building a roadmap on top of it, right? You've got that, framework. You may not be able to offer everything that you want in your roadmap, but having that roadmap ahead so you're not caught off guard at that next wave of change.
Exactly. Plus, like you said about the proof, is that's why partnering with the right insurance providers, cyber insurance providers, is so important, because yes, you can follow the control, but many times the client's like, I don't understand the control. I don't understand why you're doing it. This doesn't make sense to me. Well, less so in CMMC, but maybe with HIPAA or other things. But if it's coming from a third party, their insurance broker is telling them, hey, you need to do security awareness training. You need to have an EDR product. You need to have A, B, C, D things. Then it's not you selling them anymore, explaining to them, right? You could explain to them from today to tomorrow, right? But they're getting that narrative and what they have to do from a third party, from their insurance provider who they trust. That helps, guide them as well and make those decisions.
No, solid point that sometimes calling in a third party to validate, that also gives you one more place then to kind of show that your approach, explaining it, and proving a bit of why that's working. Now, we do have one question in the chat, and this is, I think, one that I just don't want to miss out on, is so your go-to framework. NIST, CIS, like there are so many out there, and they all kind of guide towards the same thing, but definitely at varying levels of, I don't even want to say maturity, but intensity. So Bobby, what's your favorite?
Yeah, for me, I grew up on CIS, so that's always going to have a special place in my heart. But we've had to eat, choose, sleep, breathe 800, 171, 171A, which is not a framework. Just so everybody knows, it's a special publication that outlines the way that you protect data for CMMC. So that's why I think even if you still have to do CMMC, you still have to overlay something, right? So either a NIST CSF or CIS to better secure your client, because a NIST standard, all its focus is on data protection. It's not doing the the triad, the CIA method of those types of things, because it's just worried about the data. So it doesn't care about backups from a perspective of redundancy and resiliency, those types of things. So you really want to pick a framework that is overarching. And I think probably CIS is the most adopted across, but there are others that are. I'm really curious to see what you guys say.
So I'm with you on the CIS. We do a lot of mapping to NIST just because people know it and hear it and say it, but it always goes back. We base it on the more robust side, which I would agree with you is the CIS, and getting that pushed through. I think if you can talk to CIS, you can cover pretty much any other one out there. Just a little bit of, shifting of the verbiage on it.
Yeah, I agree. My software distributor sent me like a CIS Excel sheet with like the different stuff, and you can match up different products for each item. They try to break it down very nicely. So yeah, CIS for us, but also you have to understand what industries you're in, and those industries many times will drive what kind of controls and things you have to do, like HIPAA, for example, or Bobby CMMC. So
I did a PII questionnaire last week. It rivaled like the highest level of requirements that I'd ever seen. Like there was probably close to 100 questions of various level maturities. I'm like, there's no way a client that I work with that would be able to answer this. And I know many MSPs would struggle with the detail of requirements and questions. They were even asking about penetration tests, how often it was, the organizations were. I mean, it was just like, boo, boo, boo. I'm not saying that they were requiring it, but they were asking it. And that just trend is continuing. You've got, and that's part of the reason why I said you have to have the defensibility and you have to have the evidence to provide it, because they're coming for us, guys and gals. If you don't believe it, they're going to be wanting more information. They want to know what we are. Gone are the days where you could just hand a shingle out and say, hey, I'm an MSP. I have throw AV on some systems and I'm going to be your IT guy. Like, you really got to think about your approach. There's a lot of risk now. Threat actors are way smarter than they used to be about how they attack and extort stuff. So it's gotten a lot harder.
Yeah. And I'll say one thing about those questionnaires that, as we fill them out, we're always just like, oh my God, there's so much. But what it does is gives you a perspective to start looking at things differently. Like you said, you're not necessarily saying yes to everything, but it makes you stop and think, should I, or when do I need to do this? And kind of building that roadmap again as you talk through it to hit those levels of operational maturity.
Yeah. I would say with the questionnaires, I think the most common questionnaire we get is cyber insurance applications, right? They don't even look at it. They just forward it to you. Like, oh, hey, fill this out. My broker said to fill it out. So being able to have that conversation, educate the client on, hey, look, maybe you can get a discount on your insurance if you do A, B, C, D, or maybe you should be looking at these things that they're requesting, right? And then it's a gut check on yourself. Like, oh, they're making me fill this out. Am I doing this right for the client? Do I need to change anything what I'm doing? So I think, those are very helpful to like wake us up a little bit,
Yeah.
That's huge that your folks are sending you those applications. A whole lot of MSPs still have clients who are filling them out themselves and not being a part of that conversation at all.
That's a big problem because if they fill it out wrong and something happens, they're screwed. They're not going to get any money from the insurance provider.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of folks that don't have that. So we did have a follow-up question then of IG 1, 2, or 3.
Same.
2?
Yeah, 3 is like Citibank. I mean, it's pretty. It just depends on your industry, right? But in my opinion, in my heart, I feel like all MSPs should be almost fully filling level 2. You got to be bringing it because they're coming for you. You really got to be bringing it because now what I would want my clients to be at 1 probably, and some spackling of 2 in there, but yeah. And you got to have a roadmap of how you're going to walk through, like just Jeremy said. You got to figure out how you can budget that.
Yep.
What does that yellow brick look like, and where are the flying monkeys, right? So,
and one piece that we talked about a bit in the prep call was then that importance of benchmarking so that you don't lose those margins, that it's really easy to add new things to say yes without necessarily having an eye on that bottom line all the time, and that benchmarking is a critical piece in that. Just as a way to not that let, like the yellow brick road and the monkeys. Yeah. To keep an eye on those monkeys in a,
those are mean monkeys. Let me tell you. I'm really curious, like how Jacob and Jeremy do it. You guys are so much larger than me, and I have a struggle with just 15 of us, and you guys have hundreds. Like, good Lord.
Yeah. I mean, Jacob, I'll let you answer it first, and then I'll follow up on a larger scale even.
Yeah. To tell you it's easy is not, it's definitely not easy. It's definitely a big struggle. I think the biggest challenge is being able to get all the clients on board to the same thing, to the same, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you need to make a change, right? Deploying all the changes to everybody. I think that's where, for us, the biggest challenge, the challenge is.
And, I would say from scale, the biggest challenge we have are businesses like Huntress that are constantly adding things to the product that, are being thrown at us and are great add-ons. I don't want to say that's where the problem is. It's us supporting it on the back end and then not realizing the extra time it invests in it. And, then that value add that we're adding to the client. A lot of times, as businesses and as all of us want to help, right? That's why we got into this business. It wasn't, no one said, I want to join an MSP to become a millionaire. It was, I want to build an MSP to help small businesses be more secure and keep the backbone of America running, and that's what we're all here to try to do. And so then we get these great add-ons and we're like, yeah, we love it. We're going to throw it out there. And the next thing you know, you've got have to hire another full FTE to cover it, and your clients are like, man, this is great. And, you're like, I just lost another bit of margin. So really taking the time to evaluate that value add that you're giving to the clients, and saying from their perspective, what have you just saved them? One of the big shifts I've really pushed for is the number one thing we do as an industry, you ask everyone, what do you do? What do you do? We provide great service, right? Really what you're doing is providing time back to those businesses. It's directly time related. Everything we're doing, the really small business owner used to do it. I patch the machines on the weekend, or, I go in and do these, and so you're adding time back in. And so that really needs to be part of that conversation you had. We just provided this new value add to you. We love doing it. We're taking care of you. But now we've just saved you another 3 hours, a month, a week, a day, whatever it is. You need to pay me for that. Not even directly aside of that thing. So really, that's the big thing that I look at when I look at those new things, is how much time and value are we giving the customer, and how can we kind of split that and get that margin to make sure that we're covering our side too.
I'm so with you on that time conversation, by the way. I use it all the time. People are like, why should I spend money on cybersecurity? I'm like, do you realize how long it will take you to recover from a cyber attack if it were to happen? Right. And it's also, and it moves from cybersecurity to even selling them hardware, right? They're like, why should I replace the computer that's working at 10 years old? Because it's slow and your people are not going to be able to work efficiently. So I just love that comparison with saving them time as a business so they can make more money.
Well, and as a smaller MSP compared to you guys, I think I'm able to speak a little bit in more comprehensible terms, just because we're dealing at a smaller scale than what you guys are. So, and I don't know what the scale, size wise of everybody that's on this call, but I'll talk in terms of profitability and margins that you see in peer groups discussed. So what you typically want to see is 60% margin on your agreements. And how do you track that? So what you want to do is have a PSA tool that's tracking all of your engineers' time and is applying it to that agreement, and that your leadership team is reviewing those agreements every month. So as more calls come in, just like Jeremy's saying, if you add a new tool and all of a sudden the calls come in more, you can see that. You can see that effect over time, what those tools will happen. And then you can start looking at the profitability margins, because that 60 to 70% is really the sweet spot that you want to be in. Because when you start dipping lower than that, just the fully burdened cost of employees and tools, if you have more tools, good Lord, the amount of tools that Jeremy has to deal with, they should erect a monument to the man being able to actually walk every day. It's something that's really critical. But then you have to look at your tools, and typically in agreement, you break those tools out. So those tools and other things like M365, those margins will be separate. So you can track those margins differently, but you track both, but you want to see the margins on both. And so you want to set up your agreements as you're starting off to track those appropriately. And then as you go to grow and you're changing and you're adding on CIS and doing those types of things, what's going to happen to your business over time if what you're doing is negatively or positively impacting it. You just don't want to guess. That's the wrong place to be.
Yeah, and that drift is going to happen no matter what you do as you grow, like you guys talked about, security over time really just became a burden on those agreements. You're doing vulnerability management, you're, doing more than AV, you're helping us with incident response, you're helping with all these things. And, it just became over time that we did that. And, that needs to be that driving force of pulling that out, understanding that, this is no longer the same as the AV we started with. It's now a lot more that we have to offer, and we want to secure you and take care of you, but you really need to have that conversation that it's not the same type of burden. Business owners understand that. They're not always happy about it, but they understand it from their perspective as well. They didn't start with the same price as they have now. They didn't start with the same deliverable they have now. It's grown and matured. And so you need to kind of have those conversations as a business owner to a business owner on that side.
I think this is off topic, Bobby. I think there's a lot we can learn from smaller MSPs like yourself that are doing things really well.
And I have to believe too that the importance of knowing how your customer learns and listens. That, Jacob, to your point, the time conversation for a doctor's office looks very different than the time conversation for a manufacturer. So being able to pivot and know what your customer values, and that's something that I see MSPs know how to do on a larger scale at peer group organizations and more mature MSPs, but that it's a place where the market has to pivot to. and that would make it at least a little bit easier to do. We do have one question in the chat that I don't want to miss as we kind of move forward here, is that NIST seems more policy to be handled by our clients, and less than half are technical controls. What do you do for policy templates to help your clients with those?
It's a slippery slope. It really is. Again, at scale, we have a little advantage over, what Bobby and Jacob have, is being able to offer a vCISO offering as well on top of things. But really, that's a key thing that you have to understand the difference of as you provide these services. Being very careful not to have your technicians speak to answers, not having your technicians answer those directly, because all of us, whether we like it or not, are considered experts in the field. And when it comes down to that legal side of things, if we say something, it falls back on us to uphold that and legally follow through with that. So it really is a slippery slope, helping them do it, pointing them in the right direction. If you do have someone that's trained in, CISO, that's a CISSP, get it in that side of things. Or, just offer policies around directly what you provide, the services you provide that you can control, and that side of things has always been our policy on that side of things.
So we have a podcast. I'm not sure. Am I allowed to paste that in the thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have a podcast where we talk about our journey through getting ready for CMMC. The person that is asking the question, NIST is an organization, so there's tons of standards, so it's difficult to say exactly what special publication or even framework, because you have RMF and other things like that they might be referring to. But I'm going to guess that it's probably either CSF or the 800-171, because those are the big boys on the block that everybody talks about. And yes, those are policy driven. Typically, in a well-rounded MSP offering, you're going to see about, I would say, 70 to 80% of the requirements being fulfilled almost completely by the MSP. So what does that mean? That means that the client is going to have policies and procedures that address how they, and this is where a new term you may not be aware of, a shared matrix kicks in, that speaks to how you as an MSP are addressing what's going on with the client. So if you're going to be playing in those pools, you really need to have a template that is addressing both what the clients are going to have to meet and what you're going to have to meet. And you have to be ready to talk about those conversations with the client. So it is a very difficult balance that you have to do. NIST is not a technology problem to solve. It is a people problem to solve. If you're getting into NIST and compliance in the DIB space and the DoD, you're going to be rolling up your sleeves, and it takes practice and experience and working in it and having templates that are going to make that job much easier. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Just to address thank you, Bobby. Just to address that question with the policy templates, I think partnering up with a good platform that has those templates, like Ostendio or something similar.
The best template for NIST 800-171, and it's not even their first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, is Curie Systems. The owner of that is Amir Armand. It's a complete system that has already gone through and passed an audit. She basically took the documents that she has. It's KIERI Systems, Curie Systems. And it's a full compliance document that explains how to stand up a GCC high environment. It walks you through all of it. So if you're MSP and you're thinking about going after that, don't even think about it unless you buy those. It's just my opinion.
I think I found her. Shikiri Solutions. Is that
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in the chat for anybody here. Oh, you got it?
I'll find it real quick. But yeah.
Thank you. I don't want to post the wrong thing. So another question, and this is one that I think is really timely right now, where we're kind of pivoting in the conversation, is anyone concerned about the liability aspects, kind of cost loss that the end client can suffer during a cyber attack? And will the end client come back with litigation and compensation demands against the MSP? And are you properly insured to not lose the business? There's a lot of questions baked into that one question there. So let's start with the first one. I think I've seen everybody kind of the liability aspect. How do you have that conversation with a customer before it happens, that there's at least a reference point to point back to?
That's a tough one, because these are the type of conversations you do need to have, and you need to have them documented. That's the big thing, not just a verbal conversation of, remember back on, over a beer in, December, we chatted about this. It needs to be in writing, these are the lines that we draw. These are the things that we do. And in an email format or something along those lines. I've even seen them go far as requiring signatures and things like that, depending on the liability that they're wanting to do. But it has to be an honest conversation of the liability that they're taking on through the process. Because, for instance, we can tell them you have to have MFA, and they're like, I just don't want it. You have to have that conversation in that liability, but you also have to take the, onus as, is this a liability we want to take on as a business as well? This is a big enough risk that we may, need to let that client go, type scenario conversation. So the liability needs to go both ways on that conversation of, what liability are they taking on? And are we going to take on the liability of that risk? Because at the end of the day, even if you aren't held liable for all of the charges, the damages, things like that, we as MSPs are still taking reputation risk by having that liability. So there's two sides to that liability that you need to look at.
Amen. Yeah, fun fact, I used to own a dry cleaners years ago. What does that have to do with our conversation? When we would dry clean wedding dresses, we charged about $200. A normal dress was $750. The difference was the risk, because a wedding dress, like $10,000, $8,000. Like, wedding dresses are crazy expensive. There's a lot of risk involved when you do that. And it's the same way with MSPs and our involvement. There's a lot more risk involved. So you have to make sure you're making the margins. You've got to be around as a business, so you don't go out of business because you have an incident, right? You've got to be able to make sure you're protecting yourself so you can appropriately protect your clients. And that goes right into exactly what Jeremy's talking about making sure that you have the appropriate agreements. I would be lying if I didn't say I wasn't concerned and having a healthy level of fear about stepping into the CMMC space, because you're going to get audited. You think if a client fails because we screwed up, they're going to be happy about that? No, they're not. And you think a client's going to be happy if they have an incident and we don't have a defensible position to discuss that with them? No, they won't be either. So you really have to approach that from many different directions. And that's where being part of a peer group, listening to webinars and understanding and talking, because you're not going to get it all. Nobody's perfect. I'm constantly learning. I just had a leadership meeting with my team about some things that we were just like, gosh, you just want to go back in time and punch yourself in the face a little bit. But that's life. But you got to be continually moving the needle, because the threat actors are doing the same.
Yeah, I think the reputational risk is a big one that's could be hard to dodge out of. But having those conversations in your QBRs with the clients, sending them email summaries, like Jeremy said, making sure you have the documentation supporting what you're trying to make them do. I think just something also, just having insurance, E&O, right? Make sure you have the proper coverage for your business if something were to happen, right? Let's say something happens to you or something happens to your client and they try to pursue you. Make sure your contracts are set up properly. Make sure you have the right insurance. I think also many times MSPs try to force clients to do something, and I like taking the approach where we shift some of that blame onto their insurance provider or something else, where they feel like what I mentioned before. It's like, oh, my insurance is making me do it. So like 2FA, yeah, your insurance is forcing you to do 2FA, so that's why you have to do it. I think that really helps build the ability to force clients to do certain things.
So, Jacob, I think the next question is for you, honestly. This is a broad one, but what do we need to offer A to Z? What do we need A to Z to offer HIPAA for clients?
Oh, man.
You don't need to answer A to Z, but is there a place to point someone to?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a rough.
I know. I'm like, tell me more.
I'm taking notes.
That's rough, honestly. The way we do it, so with HIPAA, from my understanding, is there's no real governing body that's like running HIPAA audits. There's no such thing as being like a there's no real like AICPA, right? You get SOC 2 certified. They're giving you that SOC certification. I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no real HIPAA certification. It's you have to do a gap analysis, and the gap analysis tells you where you need to be, and then that's how you fit into the HIPAA space. Now, to do it A to Z, my suggestion would be, which what we do is we partner with a third-party compliance group like Astendio that helps us provide, the HIPAA stuff, A to Z, the policies, the client hand-holding if needed. These Vanta, these other companies that do the same thing. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, somebody just said, is anyone HIPAA compliant? Like, that's, yeah. So.
It's a very gray line. It's if they're coming after you, it's hard sometimes.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And yeah, Derek, I agree that something's wrong that we're continuing to have this conversation after almost a decade. HIPAA's been around. Jiminy Christmas. I left the healthcare space 11 years ago, and I know it was there then. But yeah, still a good conversation, especially when you get that client. If that's not your normal industry, you're taking on that risk when you bring on somebody with compliance regulations. So it is you as the MSP provider's job to make sure that you're coloring within those lines because they're trusting you for that.
Yeah. That's a good point, Becky, because like we typically don't work with the medical field, and you think, well, you're doing CMMC. That's crazy hard. It's a different animal. It's a different animal. The policies, the approaches, the conversations you're having with doctors, those are different.
It's true.
You know what I mean? So you got to know the waters you're swimming in, and you better take that seriously because you don't want to find out that you're supposed to have a bang stick because there's sharks around when you're in the water because you ain't got one. That's not a good place to be.
Yeah, good point. I think also back to the risk conversation is and liability, understanding where does that risk lie, right? If a client's using an EHR system and all their stuff is on there, right? It's very possible that a lot of your risk was shifted to, the EHR system that they're using. So it's really understanding the business, each client's business, and how that plays into HIPAA and your liability risk, stuff like that.
So this always happens. We come in with this huge outline. You guys can attest, I build 2 to 3 page outlines for these, and we rarely get past page 1.5. We're not even at the bottom of page 1 yet. So let's move to the bottom of page 1. How frequently do you revisit this stack? Knowing that your vendors add new features, requirements change, tools change. And I mean, we just switched car insurance this week. You've also got to be looking for sometimes where some pricing that might help your margins hits too.
Yeah, we're pretty structured on how we evaluate products. We're on an 18-month cycle that we go through. Not that we take them out, we remove them, but we do full-on evaluations. We do vendor due diligence annually, but in terms of what the stack offering is, it's a continuous process really as it goes. You have to. It's not we don't configure it, leave it in there in 18 months, come back and see if we're still doing a good job. It's that continuous improvement. But in terms of a formal, if we're going to replace something, it usually follows an 18-month cycle that we get in and we're like, this is just not working out anymore, or it's fallen behind in the industry standards. Whatever it is, there's lots of reasons why it could happen that way. But that's typically our cycle.
Once a year. It's required for compliance for CMMC annually, if not more often than that. And you might be sitting in this call and you might be hearing us all talk about the stuff we're talking about. And you think to yourself, gosh, I suck. We sort of all suck, to be honest with you. Like, we're not doing everything perfect. So you really have to kind of target what is best for you to get the most amount of return on your time, the precious time that you have to try to provide the best value in return to your clients. And, you know, doing an annual review is something everybody should be doing, but there might be some other things that you really should be doing more often that are critical that you haven't started doing that yet. So, you know, play the field and learn what it is that you need to know, but it's definitely a critical part that you should have on your schedule, that you're reviewing on a regular basis and looking at the efficacy of the product, making sure it's delivering the ROI. You know, I remember we used WebRoot when it first came out. Man, it was kicking butt. It was easy to manage. It was easy to deploy. It was a great AV tool. And then it just fell off the face of the earth of efficiency. Threat actors were just pillaging it. Actually used it one time for a group vulnerability attack. I mean, it got bad. You know, we were like, well, this isn't working for us. And then we started realizing we really need to be evaluating our products, because not only can they not perform what you want, they can start to go so far down the path, AKA, you know, solar winds, or, you know, I don't know, some recent blue screens that happened. And you've seen that on the recent media. You know, vendors can do worse than not perform what they want. They can really freaking take you out. So reviewing that on a regular basis is, I think, critical. But I feel bad sometimes, because you know, when I was first starting off, I would go to like conferences, and like sometimes I remember I used to go to ConnectWise conference, and I wouldn't even finish the conference. I would just leave, because I live in Jacksonville and they usually have in Orlando. I would just drive home because I was like, my head was so full of things that I needed to do differently. I would just leave because I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I got to do this, and this. So, you know, prioritize and work on, but that's a big one. That's a big one.
Jeremy, I can only imagine what your review process looks like. 50, 60 products. Oh my God.
Well, and I'll echo something that Bobby mentioned earlier, though, is, you know, peer groups are key in this. You know, you don't really have time to go out and review every product out there. You don't have time to go out and evaluate every vendor and hear what's going on. You know, partner with those peer groups, because, you know, we'll just use the WebRoot example. You may have a perfect experience with WebRoot and be the one that dodged the bullet, while everyone else out there in the world is having the problem. And you want to be able to make that shift before you get pulled into that same typhoon of craziness. So, you know, as you grow, even our size, you know, we leverage peer groups to do a lot of that conversation and hear what's going on and that side of things. Because, again, there are times that you're in that vacuum that you don't get hit by that pain point. You know, I mean, we'll talk about the blue screen. Maybe you were just lucky and you had all your machines offline at that time, and you woke up the next morning, you're like, man, we have no problems, you know, or you could be on the Delta side of things where, you know, 2 weeks later, they're still having problems, you know. So go to those peer groups, use those peer groups to help part of this evaluation, because you don't have time to turn over every rock. You don't have time to, you know, kick over every stone. You know, use that effectively as part of your time, as your evaluation process, because sometimes we do the work for you guys, you know, someone else does, and take advantage of that.
Yeah. I think there's two times to really evaluate your products. Number one is if you have a contract that's renewing, right? That's like a good, okay, hey, look, you know, our cybersecurity contract with Huntress is renewing in a month. Let's make sure that we reevaluate what we're doing here. Is there other consolidation that we want to switch to? And I believe in cybersecurity, I consistently evaluate all my products, because you see in real time if it's working, right? If I have an MDR product and they're missing out on a simple alert that needs to take, or some sort of action isolation that needs to happen, and it's not doing that, right? I'm going to question them and be like, hey, what's going on here, right? So it's like an instant evaluation, like, okay, like this product is not doing what it's promising to deliver. I think with cybersecurity, as much as without anything else, it's really in our face if something's working or it's not working.
And that brings up a good point, that you're not just evaluating security tools. There's a whole bunch more in your stack that you're having to keep an eye on and maintain. So in our last 10 minutes, because we've already hit that point, guys, the client side of this, we've talked a lot about some of that, but people ask pretty frequently the bundles piece, that if you bundle your offerings, a lot of folks still choose to break out their security as a separate offering completely and have that precious metal, gold, better, best whatever you might want to call it. How long did it take you to structure a bundle that you were comfortable with, or an offering that you were comfortable with? We talked, that Jeremy, you talked that it was a 6-year process of adding. Bobby, you'd mentioned whack-a-mole of tools in the prep call, which I love that analogy of kind of, I fix this, now something else. How many different bundles then? How long, and then how many different bundles do you offer in security specifically? We can leave. Let's leave the rest of it alone for now, and really just focus. Do you offer different bundles with different levels of security?
I don't think levels is the right term of that. I think it's more when you're looking at your client base, what do they need? It really shouldn't be a level. I think our goal should always be maintaining a certain level of security, but there's compliance requirements, there's operational maturity requirements from your clients. There's even financial requirements that some have to meet. I think if you walked in and said, I'm going to offer you this less secure offering for $5 cheaper, you're going to be laughed right out the door. So it's really not levels of security when you look at it. It's more of operational maturity of their organization, it's compliance needs, and that side of things, and vertical specific. If you go into like a HIPAA compliant customer and you're like, I'm going to offer CMMC level requirements, they're going to laugh you out the door. But if you go into a small manufacturing company and I tell them you want to do HIPAA, you're going to face that same problem. So it's more of maturity of the bundling that you add on top of it, but it's not levels of security. I think that's a misnomer that we say quite often. We get you our gold package that offers you the best security. Well, so you're telling me the bronze is just less security? I think it's just additional layers on top side of things. So, I don't think we offer different levels of security. I think we offer different feature sets, different compliance levels. Imagine it like just, a SIEM is a good example. We keep your logs for 30 days. We keep your logs for 90 days. We keep your logs for 10 years. Those are all different levels that we offer in terms of a product, but it's not the security side of things. Our goal is to have that same level of security across the board, but just different feature sets, different items. At our scale, I can go out and buy a whole bunch of new really cool, shiny things that we can offer our clients. But if we're not offering a base level of security across the board, then we're not providing that level of, quality of premium service that we need to do. So I don't think security levels is a good way to put it, but different feature sets. What different feature sets do you bundle?
I like that term.
Yeah, I agree with Jeremy. NIST calls it defense in depth. I think there's an elegance to that. It is really necessary, and I'm a big believer in you have to provide what is required for the necessary defense in depth for your clients. Boom, that's it. And then you're raising the bar based on what's needed, and there may be other things that they may request. Occasionally I get surprised that the client's like, well, do you have something that addresses this? That's very rare. Most of the time it's like, what do I need to do? I don't know. That's the reason why I hired you. So you just tell me what bar I need to jump, and then my involvement in jumping is writing the check, right? Yeah. So it's your job to make sure it gets jumped, right? So that's really what that comes down to. And I think that's why we just have one offering, but we do have additional options that may be required on if they're in Google, or if they're in Microsoft 365, or it's more of it's more where they are in the technical needs than, because if you think about it, it's like if you're talking to the CEO that started the company like I did, like that's their baby. That's their kid. If you went to them and said, hey, you're having a critical surgery, I have the good, better, best option for your surgery. And they're going to be like, why are you even talking to me about this? Is my kid. What the heck's wrong with you? And that's kind of the mentality that I look at it when I'm going to the client. This this is their lifeblood. So I need to come at it with my best and to make sure that I'm providing the safety and security, because that's what I used to do, the good, better, best for years. That's how I operated. And just, I got punched in the face so often. I'm just like, this is enough. I gotta do this differently. So I'm pretty passionate about that one. But I mean, I've been in peer groups and others have felt very passionate about that. It kind of comes down to paper or plastic in some ways about this, when you're getting to the grocery store, but Ford or Chevrolet, I don't know.
I'm completely going to use the surgery analogy though. That's one that's brilliant. Yeah, that I like that. Mel's comment. What he heard recently from a client, what would it cost to apply cybersecurity at our company? I guess that just goes that every company's different maturity-wise.
I think the good, better, best package was originally like an MSP sales tactic, like McDonald's Happy Meals. They're going to choose the middle one because it's like the medium price, right? It's the same thing how everybody used to sell MSP packages. It's like, oh, well, you could do the hourly package or you could do the monthly package, right? Most mature MSPs these days are just, we have one MSP package that we're selling. It comes with an unlimited whatever, and this is what you get by using us. If you want it, if you don't want it, use somebody else, right? It's taking that approach. So applying that same approach to cybersecurity, it's like, okay, this is what we do as an MSP to secure you. And if you need other things, like they're forcing you to do penetration testing, then we could layer that on top. But it's having that, all right, you want to be a customer, this is what you got to do.
Yeah, you definitely have a baseline package that, again, it gets to that risk acceptance and liability acceptance. If you don't have this, we aren't going to, take on the liability of you as a customer, side of things. But, I agree, it doesn't matter. You can never lead with a good, better, best in security. You're either secure or not, type scenario when you offer it, just different feature sets.
Nathan has in there, hard to disagree. Not every client has the same threat profile. And I think we're all in alignment. It's just a different perspective I agree. They don't have the same profile, and your single offering needs to accommodate for where they are in the ecosystem space. So you have a tool chest. When you go to the client, you don't just throw all the tools on the table and say, pick some, before I have that conversation, I go in the back and make sure, and I'm looking at where they're at, and I'm picking where that bar needs to be for them, where they are at. And that's what I offer, because I have to be able to defend myself. Hopefully I don't have to defend myself. Hopefully Defense in Depth did its job and we're all high-fiving each other. But if it doesn't, everybody's friends until you're not. Yeah. Right. So
I think that's a good point. Different levels of compliance, going back to my same conversation, you aren't going to offer a CMC level package to a non-regulatory industry. So, you can call it good, better, best. You can call it compliance level packaging, but your target customer profile is going to identify what you're offering. Normal MSP, a CMC regulatory requirement business is not going to walk in the door and be like, hey, support us. And you're going to be like, okay, here's our, AV and email filter and web filter, and you're covered. So it gets to a target level customer that identifies that, as opposed to your offering. Even our size, if a Google walked in and said, we need you to take over our managed service, we would love to do it. But if they said, we need you to do our security, we're not going to throw them our baseline package and be like, here you go. This is what it is. We're going to, build a product that matches their needs. So bundling that based on vertical or based on your target profile is what you do. It's not a good, better, best when it comes to it. Just like, Bobby said about the, surgery. It's the same surgery, but you can have an intern do it. We can have Jim off the street, or we can have a doctor that has 20 years tenure on it. That's not what you're throwing at them. You're saying we're going to give you the best surgery, overall, So I think you're right. The threat level is different for each one, but it's based on your target customer profile more than a package of good, better, best.
And on that note, we are at time. It's insane. This always goes so fast. Just shameless plug for some upcoming Huntress thing. We are doing a Huntress Roadshow. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to our events page in the chat. We are in 10 different cities over 5 weeks. It's a crazy chaos travel schedule. Please check it out if we're near you. We will be talking a lot about cyber insurance, incident readiness, and incident response planning. So it's not a Huntress show in content. It's really focusing on incident response and some of those conversations to have with your customers. Thank you, all three of you, so much for your time today. This was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for staying on. And we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
See you in New York.
Bye. Yes. See you soon.
Bye.